Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, June 2nd, 2023. We've got members of the media, academia, financial services, and government standing by as we break down and analyze all the news and events for the week. So sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday.
If you're tired of the same old story, turn some pages.
Well, we're going to kick things off with a look at what's happening on Capitol Hill in terms of legislation, regulation, litigation, arbitration, mediation. Here to join us to break it all down, he's one half of the Legal Eagles. He's also a principal with Groom Law Group. That's an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the show, Kevin Walsh. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us on this holiday weekend.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. It's always good to be on the show. And, listeners, I hope everyone has if you're a U.S. listener, I hope you have a great 4th of July. If you're a Canadian listener, have a great Canada Day. And if you're listening from somewhere else in the world, I hope you get to enjoy this, great long weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I second that, Kevin. Kevin, I think we wanted to focus our attention on a recent lawsuit. Yale University recently had a win on a retirement fee trial. So what's the skinny on this one?
Yeah, so in the District of Connecticut, you had a group of participants sue Yale University in the case the Lally versus Yale University. And essentially what they were arguing was that they said Yale had mismanaged its retirement plan and that it had led to an excess in administrative fees and investment fees. Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot about, cases of motion to dismiss phase because, that's the phase before discovery. Discovery is expensive for defense. And so there's a big settlement pressure there. We also talk a lot about cases at summary judgment, which is, after discovery has happened, you put in a brief to say, look, we're not really arguing over the facts. The facts are pretty clear. Can you decide, judge, as a matter of law? And rarely then do we see cases get past that, but a few cases go to trial. Mm-hmm. And in the ERISA space, the trials are usually bench trials, meaning that the judge typically, sits and watches the presentation of the evidence and decides the case. What's really interesting is in the Yale case, a jury was used. So the plaintiffs requested a jury. The judge agreed with them that it was appropriate to use a jury trial. And the big outcome here, the jury concluded that Yale owed no damages to the plan. And I'm framing it as the jury concluded that Yale owes no damage to the plan because this case kind of highlights that when you have a jury, weird things can happen. And weird things did happen. So you open up the sheet and a jury, a jury decision, it's basically a check the box thing for the jury. And there's a number of questions. And, the first question on the jury form here was essentially, did you find that Yale breached its fiduciary responsibilities? Did Yale, did the fiduciaries of the plan mismanage the plan? And the jury checked the box, yes. So you're thinking, oh my God, they mismanaged the plan. There's going to be damages here. This is going to be a problem for Yale. And then you look at the next box and it says, what do you award damages? And it says 0. And you're kind of puzzled. And then there's another box on it, that a couple more boxes. And at bottom, if you look through the form, what becomes clear is that, the jury thought that Yale didn't have a great process when they selected, their plan record keeper, when they selected their plan investments. Mm-hmm. But they thought that a prudent fiduciary could use a prudent process and make the same decision. So in a sense, they concluded, the process was messed up, but no harm, no foul. Really weird decision, but it really highlights the importance of process, which is something that, you, David, and I highlight week in, week out, which is, if you're running a plan, if you're acting on behalf of participants, it's important to make the right decision. but you also really need to have a great process. And here it seems as though the fiduciaries got somewhat lucky, where the jury seems to suggest that the process wasn't great, but that they got to a good enough outcome.
So, Kevin, it's rare, as you said, that a jury would sit on a trial like this. I think of, really more significant crimes outside of a retirement plan. How do you, and I know you're probably not an expert in voir dire, but how do you pick a jury? You got to pick 12 people are on a jury, right? Isn't that correct? And how do you pick jurors? Because retirement plans, there's a lot of jargon in there, and I'm just trying to think it through. It's such an odd process to go through. How do you find competent jurors, and how do you explain to them all of these concepts that are really inside baseball? For
Jeff, I think you're highlighting some of the challenges that the plaintiffs' lawyers, the defense lawyers had. ERISA trials rarely go to juries, so both sides probably had less experience picking juries to figure out what was going to work for them. We've seen plaintiffs' bar request juries in the past, and here, having a jury may have come back to bite them. So, it's a rarity in the ERISA space, which makes it tough to have any big picture takeaways about what juries mean, because they're all different. They're all made up of just local citizens. But you raised some great points that if you're going to have a jury, your audience definitely has a different level of sophistication about some of these issues than the judge would. And just an aside here, when I worked for a judge for a little bit, ERISA cases were not viewed as the exciting, easy one. Even in the legal profession, the ERISA cases were viewed as being the complicated, meaty, and somewhat boring one.
Yeah. It just begs a question. And in a typical case, is it the plaintiff's attorney that says, I want a jury trial, or is it the defendant, or do they have to agree? I'm just trying. I don't remember. I never went to law school, so I'm just trying to ask.
So typically we'll see typically to the extent that anyone asks for a jury, in the ERISA space, it's usually the plaintiff side that asks for a jury. The defense side, frequently opposes the request for a jury, and then the judge has to decide whether or not a jury is appropriate. Yeah, both sides can agree, or either side can ask. With the level of sophistication here, I think we typically see, we see judge decided cases, and usually it's not a huge controversy that both sides agree on a judge decided case.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about in my head when you're talking about this going to a jury, I'm thinking about Joe Pesci arguing this case before the jury. I know that was not the case, and I don't want to make light of the prosecutor or the defense, the attorneys, but that's what I'm thinking about in my head as you're talking. Kevin, I know it's hard to read the tea leaves here, because at one side you have a decision, but then that yes, there was a mismanagement of funds, but at the same time the award was zero. So is there anything to read from this, knowing that for the most part you're not going to have a jury trial in ERISA cases, and presumably because of this outcome you may not have another one for a long time?
I mean, there's always some tea leaves to read. When I've talked to plan sponsors or to fiduciaries on the defense side, some of them have acted as though it's a really big deal if they end up with a jury trial. It's a bad thing. This may suggest that it might not be as bad a thing for the defense side to have a jury trial, but every jury is different. And I think the thing that folks fear sometimes is that it really depends on the people and what side of the bed they wake up.
Yep. And that you're dealing, they say in the MMA and the UFC, you never want to leave it to the judges because they're human beings. In this case, it's kind of the same thing. You're dealing with, again, one's a sport, one is a pretty important legal matter. But again, you're dealing with human beings. Kevin, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for stopping by. Really interesting case from a lot of different perspectives. Wishing you a wonderful weekend. Have a great holiday. And we look forward to having you and your colleague, David Levine, back next week.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, listeners.
Bye, Kevin. Have a good weekend. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. Now we're going to take a look back at a recent interview we did with Michael Learsh of Wells Fargo Advisors, discussing how small business owners don't necessarily want to have their children inherit their business. Let's give it a listen. Michael, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Of course, Jeff. Happy to be here.
All right, let's talk about the study, because I just find it amazing. I want to get your reaction to this. Half of business owners don't want their children to inherit and run their business. And a business is a significant asset. That's a pretty big statement. What do you infer from that headline?
So there are two things. The first one is we don't want to leave out the part where over 90% wanted their children to make their own way in the world and build and protect their own wealth. But within that framework, Jeff, we had nearly half of the respondents say that they thought their children might struggle to build and protect their own wealth too. So you can kind of see both sides of it. I want my children to make their own way. I'm concerned that they might not be able to do that. And then combine this with what you said. I'm not sure I want them, or I don't want them to succeed me in terms of a business plan. What you see is a deep concern that these days it's very difficult to create human beings, so think of it as children, who can actually manage, protect their own finances, their own wealth. And you have to ask yourself, why? And these human beings, these parents, these business owners said that they kind of brought it on themselves a bit. While they passed their own values along, so think of it as 3/4 said they passed their values along, they were concerned that they soothed and smoothed a little too much of the financial difficulties of their children by paying for things like education, homes, bills, you name it. And they took that on themselves, and they admitted they did that a bit, Jeff.
Yeah. And so the parents have some concerns. I'm sure the kids didn't say, hey, don't get me that new car. I don't need that car. let me do it myself. I mean, look, it's tough. I mean, your parents want to love you and they want to love their children. At the same time, where does that love end and parenting begin? How much of this, Michael, do you think is attributed, the reaction to the lack of maybe financial literacy? We're talking about, I know you guys talk about that at Wells, but we talk about it here on the network, and it's happening all across the country. How much of this is predicated on that lack of understanding just basic finance?
So to your point, Jeff, we know money talk in families is taboo. That's very clear, especially in the United States of America. So I think we can attribute quite a bit of it to financial literacy, but I think more importantly, to actually creating resilience in families around money. And that's really what we saw in this study. And that's what I was alluding to, is that parents, to your comment, they really do want to help their children, but they admit that instead of helping their children, they may be creating circumstances in which they don't allow them to fail and fail early, Jeff. And that's a huge component of financial literacy, right? We're not always going to win. We're not always going to be successful. And in fact, the survey participants, over 90% of them said hard work was the number one reason why they were successful. And then they also attributed to luck. So think of those two things together. I'm just working hard all the time. And then I work hard when that moment happens and my business is going to take off, Jeff. And that really comes across as the key concern, is they're not really creating that work ethic, that resilience with their children, because they're paying for so much. And especially Gen Xers said that, Jeff. Gen Xers admitted they were the biggest culprits. So think of people born in the 70s of helping their children through their financial life. And Jeff, you're pointing to yourself.
Yeah, I am certainly one of those Gen Xers. And I was going to ask you about that. My parents are boomers, baby boomers. So grew up at the end of World War II into the booming 50s. What about other generations? I mean, I know I didn't mean to cut you off, by the way, on Gen Xers, but what about other generations? Gen Z parents. Well, maybe Gen Z parents, Gen Y parents are a little bit too young. But what about some of the other generations? What do they say about this?
So when we looked at the boomers, and you can think about the types of things they're willing to pay for, things like grandchildren's education came up. And so education was a huge focus. So not only hard work, but education. And so when you look at that boomer audience, that seems to be a huge focal point. So you might want to think of it as in really thinking of goals or things that they want their family to accomplish. They're focused on that when it comes to the monetary distribution, whereas to our comment on Gen Xers. So Jeff, again, I'm not trying to call you out, but when you think of that, it has a less goal orientation. It's just about soothing a situation or getting a child through a difficulty rather than actually saying, okay, let me help you buy a home or achieve a particular purpose. So one other element of this is, you can think of it as in terms of this goal orientation, net worth. So those with 5 million or more of our survey participants were far more likely to want to help a child create, think of it as home ownership. So help them buy a home, not buy it outright for them, Jeff, but help them buy a home. So that's what I mean by goal orientation. And that's where you saw those boomers and those Gen Xers really diverge.
Well, Michael certainly did a great job. I want to thank him. I want to thank Wells Fargo advisors for stopping by to bring us up to date on how you, as a business owner, can transfer your business. And that wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, and drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news and lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content, visit our website, and of course, all of our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN AM. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.